It's just after midnight and you're driving down a narrow 2-lane back road that winds through thick woods. The only sound is the low hum of your tires on asphalt. Then suddenly something moves at the edge of the road, forcing you to slam on your brakes. Your headlights sweep the shoulder of the road and land on a shape. It's pale, oddly proportioned, and far too thin to be any animal you've ever seen. It moves low to the ground and on all fours with long, loose limbs. Its stark white, bone-tight skin is briefly visible before it turns towards you, black eyes glaring, and then vanishes into the trees. That chilling wrongness at the edge of a familiar road is what people are talking about when they mention pale crawlers. Welcome to Arcane Station. I'm your host, Mike Porter, and tonight we dive into the creepy and terrifying creature called the pale crawler. Pale crawlers represent a modern legend existing between online horror stories and genuine unsettling experiences. While the name itself has emerged recently on forums and subreddits and horror sites over the last 2 decades, the basic image is ancient, a gaunt, pale, human-like figure that moves strangely, usually at night. Reports are remarkably consistent, describing long limbs, pale, hairless, white or light blue skin that's almost translucent, and a lurching but amazingly fast animal-like locomotion. Witnesses are universally left terrified and bewildered. And these accounts come from rural parts of the United States, Canada, Mexico, and beyond. They are reported by drivers who catch a glimpse on the highway, campers who wake to movement outside their tents, and homeowners reviewing security footage. To make sense of this phenomenon, we must treat each of these reports as data, real human experiences, and apply a step-by-step process of elimination. We'll start with the most likely, normal explanations, like misidentified animals, hoaxes, or misperceptions, before moving to possibilities that are really hard to dismiss as well, such as undiscovered animals, something paranormal, or an interdimensional theory. Now, the origins of the pale crawlers are complex, fusing the power of the modern internet with ancient human fears. While message boards and viral videos created a shared modern template for this wrong-looking human-like thing, these images are built upon much older folklore archetypes. Across cultures, there are recurring themes and figures that produce the same chilling emotional impact. Now, the first is emaciated human predators. These are feral or diminished human figures that live on the boundary between civilization and the wild. Imagine cannibalistic humans with ailments that cause a sickly pallor, deranged from illness like rabies or prions disease, or people in a psychological break, attacking unwitting people in the wilderness. In Algonquin folklore, the Wendigo is an unnatural gaunt human-turned creature that embodies starvation and cannibalism. This fits in the template of a pale, long-limbed, and sickly creature, their bodies changed by the curse from engaging in the taboo act of cannibalism. And then there's revenants and ghouls. In medieval European accounts, these featured figures which were tied to the dead or those afflicted by disease. Basically, imagine zombies, ghouls, or vampires' thralls. Medieval lore suggests that these creatures were created through the ingestion of vampires' blood, sicknesses, or just the fact that they were rising from the dead. There's also this concept of the strigoi, which are feral versions of vampires that are similar to ghouls. These examples demonstrate a long-standing human pattern, an embedded survival instinct to fear and distrust a human-like figure that appears sick, pale, wrong, or predatory. And I think this is where the uncanny valley effect comes from. Ancient creatures which were pale and sickly and humanoid in appearances were a threat to humans. Naturally, we would have this uneasiness, like we do when we see an almost human CGI on a movie, or androids with human-like features, because in our past there had to be something that was trying to mimic us to get us to drop our guard. So from the past to the present, the idea of these pale creatures has sustained an influence on our psyches. Two pieces of modern pop culture are especially important to the pale crawler's rise. The first is the rake. This creature is a result of a storytelling effort in a subreddit called creepypasta. The story was created in the early 2000s about a creature called the rake. This fictional story is about a gaunt, hairless humanoid that stalks people. Although purely fictional, its image quickly became a lens through which people interpreted and described ambiguous real-world sightings. The second is the Fresno Nightcrawlers. This viral video footage was widely shared in 2007 and showed a grainy security clip of two long, thin, white figures walking across a yard at night. This striking visual went viral, providing a powerful shorthand for thin, stick-limbed beings, influencing how people interpret these quick glimpses of these pale creatures that they see. And all media provides blueprints for our mental mapping of the bizarre. For instance, in film and television, they further shape and clarify these monster images, providing high-definition snapshots for what the imagination only supplies in blurry glimpses. There are a couple of films which really encapsulates what a pale crawler might look and how they behave. The first of these movies is called The Descent from 2005. This film introduced blind, pale, fast, and spider-like cave-dwelling humanoids. Their jerky, animal-like movements are now a classic reference for witnesses describing fast, pale humanoids. The next films are The Cave, also from 2005, and REC, or Rec, from 2007. These films reinforce the idea of mutated, fast-moving, crawling figures adapted to darkness or transformed by infectious processes. Another film was called The Tunnel from 2011. This found footage film added a conspiracy element, a government cover-up, feeding the narrative that something weird must be the subject of someone trying to hide it, if we don't see them all the time or if they don't have any reports available. This media influence is critical. It provides visuals for the brain to reference during a sighting and offers ready-made narrative frames, subterranean creatures, infectious diseases, to make sense of the unusual. And there's other types of media as well that help further define the behavior of these creatures. And that's through online forums, social media, and local cryptid blogs. And sometimes there's the occasional surveillance videos. Most sightings are from a single witness and last a very short period of time, though a smaller number include physical evidence or multiple witnesses. And what we find is there are common encounter patterns. The first and the most common is roadside sightings. A driver may catch a quick, high-risk glimpse of something on the shoulder before it moves into the bushes, making misidentification likely due to low light and motion. Then there's campground and forest encounters. These typically last a bit longer than roadside sightings, and they sometimes include strange sounds or an intense feeling of being watched. Then we have home surveillance footage. Grainy, distant photos of pale figures moving across the yard at night. What hurts the reliability of this footage is that it's typically undermined by admissions that some videos were altered or staged. We then have close encounters with strange sounds. The most unsettling reports involve strange voices or imitations of humans like suffering or in pain, suggesting intelligence or strategic behavior. And then the rarest of all of these is physical evidence, claims of finding tracks or disturbed ground, A very few traces have been photographed, but most lack independent verification by scientists. Now, there are some really compelling cases I want to talk about, and they are a bit longer, but I think this is what is kind of tipping me into the realm of this is actually something we should look into. The first is the case of a pig hunter. This guy was an experienced hog hunter, and he used a thermal scope late at night on public land to go hog hunting. He said at around 2 a.m. he noticed an unusual silence and then movement on a slight rise in the middle of the field. He said the heat signature was low, moving in fits and starts, and at first he thought it might be a bear or a raccoon, but as it became more focused, he realized that it was actually a human, naked and hunched over, and a male, moving with odd twitching motions. The hunter was unsettled when the figure squatted down and put its hands in the dirt and sat like a dog. It raised its head and then the hunter heard a pleading female voice say, "Help, I'm lost. Please, I can't walk." Now the hunter believed that he was being lured into a trap. When he stood up to leave, the figure looked directly at him. And through the thermal scope, he said that the eyes appeared as two bright, hot points, and the hunter said he thought he saw a smile. The figure stood up, appearing at least 6 feet tall and very skinny. The hunter refused to shoot at something that he said looked like it was a human. So the hunter started to scramble down out of the tree stand, and he said the figure then dropped back onto all fours, made a sound that he described as a threat, and then Hunter raised his rifle, and after a brief standoff, the creature moved with terrifying speed towards the tree line. The hunter fired off a couple of warning shots before jumping down from his tree stand and running to his truck. He later said that he reported the incident to Fish and Game, which reportedly scolded him for hunting alone, but they didn't file an investigative report. Now, what makes this case important is that it's detailed, including a long observation period through optical equipment, a non-human or a human vocalization that wasn't right for the body type, and a report to authorities that makes it more valuable as data. So we have a little bit more information, but there's still some concern about the validity because of the location of the report on a subreddit. The next case I heard about on TikTok, and this has happened very recently in the last week, and it's the case that's called the "That's Not Human" 911 call. This case is terrifying because you have actual audio from a 911 call, and this supposedly took place in Pender County, North Carolina, and the driver reportedly saw a bloody figure standing on the side of the road in a Civil War uniform and bleeding from the head. And as he slowed down to take a better look to make sure the person was okay, he said he heard a heavy thud in the bed of his truck. Now, this happened on the Black River Road near Morris Creek. And when this thing jumped into the bed of his truck, he said he turned on the bed light and he saw this creature and he started screaming, "That's not human, that's not human." So what he claimed he saw was a long, thin, pale figure that was far too tall, like 7 feet or more, in the bed of his truck. And he started swerving, and eventually he lost it. He knocked it off. Now later on there was a video of a sheriff describing the call and attesting to the truth about the encounter, but my concern with that is that the advent of AI videos, it's so easy to fake a person sitting in an office talking about something. So that's where I kind of have some difficulty understanding this. But the panic in the audio is hard to fake. The difficulty, like I said, is that the case fails to stand up to verification. There's no publicly available police records. The only confirmation is from that sheriff in a video, and there's some dramatic details that get added or removed. And so there's a lack of solid evidence on this case, which leaves it, in this middle ground of me believing some of it, but not believing other parts of it. I am sure that more details will come to light as we progress, because this was only a week ago and they just started to do more investigation into this, and I believe there's actually a follow-up interview with the guy. However, it's the back of his head and you don't actually see who it is. So the next case involves Don Herbert. This guy was a miner in Canada's Northern Territories, and he reported seeing a pale, hairless human-like creature crouched in a ditch on the side of the road. He described it as having long, spindly legs, grayish skin, and here's the weird part. He said it had a face that was dominated by what he said looked like a beak. And as he drove past the creature, it jumped up and started running after him in his truck, and he said it ran alongside his truck at a speed of 50 miles an hour for a short period of time before, Don sped away into the night. He later returned with a friend and found fresh prints in the soft ground. He photographed the tracks, which local trackers compared to goat prints, although some of those trackers also said that the tracks were just plain weird. So he and a local contact spent weeks following the prints that showed up repeatedly in the same area, and eventually he was led back to a cave where those tracks were going to, but they are unable to go further into the cave to find out what was in there. So again, this is all hearsay and speculation, but there is some validity to this because he does have some information that he supplied to trackers and to the police. And the importance of this case is that it's a rare multi-step encounter. There's a roadside sighting, a follow-up investigation, and physical trace evidence in the form of photos and tracks. Where he needs to get more information is from scientists to look at the tracks, to verify them, and or certified trackers. There are certified trackers that could give you exceptional information just based on a track. So this is the one I believe the most, and I'll tell you why. This next case is personal. So my wife was a sales manager in the Pacific Northwest and oversaw a 5-state region, and she would be gone for a week or so at a time. So she came home after one of these multi-state tours, and she was on the way home from Idaho to Gold Bar, Washington, and she saw something in the road near the border. As soon as she walked into the house, she said, "How big are sloths?" She didn't say hi or ask me how I was, which was unusual for her. She just opened the door and she said, "How big are sloths?" And I said, "Well, they're roughly about, 20 to 30 inches long, maybe 8 to 15 pounds. They're not big." And she goes, "Well, that's not it." And I said, "Well, what are you talking about?" And she described this creature laying in the road as if it had been hit by a car. And she said it was between 5 to 6 feet long, hairless, pale, and it had very long claws like a sloth. Now, my wife isn't prone to flights or fancy or even interested in cryptids at all, so she just found it odd and kept driving. And I was flabbergasted. Like, "You didn't stop and take a picture?" And she goes, "Why would I?" So I wish I had gone to see it myself, but she couldn't remember the exact location, and it was several hours away. So even if I did get close, by the time I got there, it may be moved or taken away or whatever. So what exactly are we dealing with? Let's walk through some things about what it may or may not be, some theories and explanations perhaps, and at least try to use some sort of semi-scientific process to figure it out. So there's the first theory is that we're just seeing sick animals, like those with mange, seen in poor lighting conditions. What supports this idea is that mange can create emaciated, hairless, scabbed animals with strange movement, and sick animals can lose their fear of humans, and low light easily distorts a silhouette into a human-like figure. But where this theory falls flat is that many witnesses describe human-like limbs, hands, or joint structures that don't match local animals. So let's move to a different theory then. What if it's just humans with medical conditions? Sightings could just be malnourished, genetically unique, or intoxicated people moving abnormally. What supports this theory is genetic disorders like Marfan syndrome can create tall, slender, disproportionate bodies. Severe malnutrition causes gaunt, pale bodies, and substance abuse or psychosis can cause jerky movements and strange vocalizations. And there's feral people, people that live out in the wilderness and have lost all contact with society. And they may have reverted back to these strange caveman-like societies that they, could have these isolated communities. Now, there's also genetic blood-borne anomalies that can take place as well that can create bluish or very light blue skin. And one family from the 1800s was called the Fugate family in Kentucky, and they had this, I think it was called methemoglobinemia, and basically it's just this blue tint to your skin. So, once again, there are things that can cause us to question this theory. Many reports involve limb length, joint angles, and speeds that exceed normal human physical abilities. Cases with impossible movement or non-human physical evidence like tracks challenge the theory of this being a human. And also, even if the proportions were correct for a person with Marfan syndrome, they typically have poor respiratory and pulmonary capacity, so running around on all fours would be almost impossible for them. So then, if that's not the case, then what about hoaxes? The theory is that reports are either deliberate fakes or honest observations filled in with details from viral stories. What really makes me feel like that most reports can be put in this bucket is that the rake and the Fresno night crawlers predate many modern reports, and they provide this sort of shared visual template. Some online media has been proven or admitted to be fake. However, hoaxes explain fake media, but what they don't explain is for multiple independent high detail encounters that last a long time, or they don't explain genuinely unusual physical evidence. So if it's not that, then let's look at another human subject. Some reports may be hallucinations or misperceptions due to sleep deprivation, substance abuse or use, or neurological conditions. There is some validity to this claim. Sleep paralysis can produce vivid intruder hallucinations with intense fear. Psychosis can cause convincing visual and auditory hallucinations. Typically, those take place in a house, though, and not at the edge of the woods, and they are typically not very long. They're certainly not sustained outdoor encounters observed by multiple witnesses. So, clear footage and physical traces can't be explained by a hallucination model. One thing that I like to always go to is the concept of a tulpa or a collective thought form. The shared mental focus of online communities can create a tulpa, or group imagined entity, like the Philip experiment from the 70s, that becomes a shared subject for strange experiences. I like this concept because culture and shared ideas influence what people see during a hallucination. Online communities sometimes practice creating tulpas that members claim to experience as autonomous beings. This explains subjective experiences but not physical evidence, so unless the evidence is faked, it can't be this tulpa creature. So then let's go to a more odd explanation. What if this is a paranormal entity? Reports describe non-physical or semi-physical entities like spirits or shadow people that exhibit human-like outlines and predatory behavior. What makes this possible is that folklore from many cultures contain human-like spirits that match the sudden appearance, intense dread, and boundary dwelling described by witnesses. I don't want to dismiss the possibility, but paranormal theories are hard to test scientifically and require completely ruling out all other normal explanations, which most cases lack the documentation to do. And kind of relevant to what's going on in the news lately, what if this is an alien or an interdimensional connection? Crawlers could be non-terrestrial beings or entities that briefly enter our reality from adjacent dimensions, explaining reports that link human-like sightings with UFOs or Weird electromagnetic activity. Some reports of human-like figures occur simultaneously with reports of strange lights or instrument anomalies. This is another difficult one to get evidence for. It's an extraordinary claim requiring extraordinary, repeatable, instrument-based evidence, which is currently lacking. Ultimately, after exhausting all other possible explanations, it could just be an unknown cryptid species. History shows new species are discovered when tracks or specimens are found. Some reports show multiple sightings clustered in a specific region with alleged tracks. In the 2010s, scientists figured out that there were two distinct African elephant species, a savanna elephant and a jungle elephant. Now I know that they're still the same thing, they look almost exactly the same, but the pale crawler might be just another hominid or hominin species. The problem is that there's no biological specimen, there's no environmental DNA, no clear tissue, or undeniable DNA sample at all. If a large breeding population existed, you would imagine that we should be seeing more consistent physical evidence, unless they are using caves as a means of travel. So, while most pale crawler reports will ultimately be explained by mundane theories, a small subset of cases resist easy categorization. These cases are pushed into the realm of high strangeness by several factors. The folklore continuity. The recurring motif of the pale, gaunt, boundary-dwelling figure suggests a long-standing human framework for interpreting primal threats at the edge of our known world. Cross-phenomenon clusters. A small number of cases include simultaneous reports of other strange things, strange lights, electromagnetic interference, or physical effects. These multi-phenomenon events are harder to explain with a single normal cause. The unexpected behavior. Some accounts describe the creature mimicking human sounds, luring or observing, suggesting intelligence and strategy, pushing these cases away from simple animal misidentifications. And then there's the psychological response we have. Regardless of what the creature is, the consistent report of deep, immediate fear, a primal animal reaction to being seen by a predator, is a measurable part of the phenomenon. This means that a small group of cases, those with long observations, multiple witnesses, and properly analyzed physical traces, they warrant serious scientific attention. So I'm going to give you a little bit of investigation guidance. To take a report seriously, an investigator must follow a methodical, prioritized approach. So number one, collect details immediately. The date, the time, GPS locations if possible, and full witness story. Include weather and lighting conditions. Give more weight to longer and closer observations. 2. Preserve evidence. Request all photos and videos and insist on the raw footage or original files to prevent digital manipulation or compression artifacts. Number 3. Search records. Look up local police, sheriff logs, hospital, EMS, and wildlife agency reports, filing a public records request if necessary. Number 4. Check for influence or corroboration. Ask if the witness recently saw related viral media or movies. Talk to neighbors. Check trail cams and ask area hunters for similar reports. Number 5. Forensic analysis. If tracks are found, send photos to a reputable tracker. If hair or tissue is found, preserve it in a sterile container for lab DNA testing. And number 6, prioritize elimination. Systematically rule out every normal explanation, animal, human, hoax, neurological, before placing a case into the unexplained category. Now imagine you've heard about a strange creature sighting, maybe a pale crawler on a back road or a Bigfoot near a river, and you want to see if there's any official records of the event. The process often looks like this. So if you follow this multi-step process to track down a report, it's more likely that you'll get the information that you need. The first is to start local, police and sheriff. So you begin by filing an open records request. with the agency that you would like to, find the information from, or where the original report was filed. If it's local, inside the city limits, then a local police department may have that information. If the incident occurred in the county or rural areas, then talk to the sheriff's office. Ask for incident reports, call logs, CAD dispatch records, and body cam or dash cam footage for the date and time in question. Number 2, branch out to state and county agencies. Expand your search to other jurisdictions that may have responded. State highway patrol or state police for incidents near state roads or involving traffic. Fish and wildlife or game wardens for unusual animal reports, poaching or hunting accidents, usually under the state departments of natural resources. So whichever state you're in, they have a Department of Natural Resources that you would ask this information from. State park rangers for incidents within state parks or recreation areas. When you're doing that, you will file with the state's Park and Recreation Department, and that's where you'll send that information request form. And then constables. In a few states where they still have law enforcement roles, check their office or the county clerk. Now, if you want to spread out your search wider, check federal agencies. If the incident occurred on federally managed land, submit a FOIA request through the specific agency's office or online portal. So if it happened in a national park or a recreation area, then you talk to the National Park Service. If it was just inside of a national forest, talk to the U.S. Forest Service. If it happened in a wildlife refuge, then you talk to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And you want to be very careful with how you word your request. So to catch all the relevant information, keep your request broad but specific to the facts. An example of this would be, I'm requesting all incident reports, call logs, dispatch records, or officer notes related to reports of an unusual animal, unidentified creature, or suspicious persons in this location on this date range. This includes any records created by responding officers, rangers, or wardens. And then you have to follow the trail. Since no single database links all these agencies together, you may have to go to each one of these agencies and file a request for each one. And if you think about this process, it's like a spider web. At the center is the event itself. Around it are layers of agencies, local police, county sheriffs. Your job is to start at the middle and work outward, touching each strand until you find out where the records are stuck. Most of these reports are accounted for by normal theories. However, the small subset of cases that remain puzzling, long observations, multiple independent witnesses, and alleged physical traces, they are truly worth careful scientific effort. So, in closing, what should we conclude about the pale crawlers? The straightforward answer is this. Most of the reports are best explained by normal theories, misidentified animals, people in unusual conditions, hoaxes, or simple misperceptions. These are the things that account for most of the strange reports in general. At the same time, there is a small group of cases that are more challenging to explain. Long observations under good conditions, multiple independent witnesses, and alleged physical traces. Those cases deserve careful documentation and forensic testing. We can't say from the current public records that those cases proved the existence of a new creature or an interdimensional or ultra-dimensional being, but what we can say is that they're interesting and worth careful scientific attention. Finally, no matter how you feel about the paranormal, these cases matter. They show how our brains work under stress and in low visibility conditions, how culture influences what we see, and how ordinary people experience genuine fear at the edge of night. They also show that if you want to investigate seriously, you have to collect and preserve evidence and pursue normal explanations first. If you do that, occasionally something genuinely puzzling happens, and that's where the careful investigator finds that the work is truly worth doing. If you've ever seen something pale at the edge of the woods, or if you have a video, photos, or a track photo you want me to look at, send it to mike@arcanestation.com. That's mike@arcane-station.com. If you want to help research a case, include as many concrete details as you can: date, time, GPS locations, witness names, or contact information, and the original media files if you have it. If this episode made you curious, share it with a friend who likes strange and unsettling things. Subscribe for weekly episodes where we examine cryptids, high-strangeness, conspiracies, the bizarre, you name it. If you have ideas for future episodes, a creature you want me to investigate, or a case you think I missed, email me once again at mike@arcane-station.com. Thanks for listening. Stay awake. Take it slow on the back roads, and keep your flashlight handy. Oh, and make sure you have a camera too. That would be helpful. Good night.